Good.
Morning, Lisa. Did she leave? She must
Lisa
have
here.
left. Nope, she's
Okay.
here. Good morning. I
Okay.
can't hear you. You're like, it's muted on your end.
Okay, I got it. Shalom, Messiah. Shalom, Michael.
Hi there, Lisa. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Look
How
at
are
that
you?
smile.
Oh,
Look at all that light behind you and on you. What's going on?
not much, not much. Am I the only one here?
Well, you're the only one that matters, I guess, right now. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, what a schmoozer. Oh, yeah, vey. What a schmoozer.
No,
Funny.
there's other people here. We're just all getting started.
Okay,
So,
okay, good.
Alright.
As soon as we get back into this.
Okay, so
Alright.
I'm trying something new this week, so just bear with me if it doesn't go according to plan. I'm going to use one of the screens as just to go through a like a PowerPoint. Hopefully it makes you can. I think who was it? D who had. If you want to use Zoom, you can pin a video. If you want to make one of the main screens, you can just right click and then click pin.
Okay, I will try that. Thank you.
Hey,
All
I'm not going to mess with anything so I don't lose everybody.
All right, good. So if we ready to start, we can go. All right,
Yeah,
so
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so just say a quick hi to everybody. 1 sec. And okay, so we got Mariela. How you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for coming. All right, and D. D, after that, don't have your last name. What's your D? Are you all right? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm sorry.
Just
Hi,
saying
how are
hi.
you? Shalom.
Yeah,
Shalom.
thank you so much for coming. It's good to have you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, always. And Uzi, you made it.
Hey, what do you want?
Time to go shopping, right?
Gotta get some shopping stuff going.
All right, and then we got Pamela. You can unmute yourself. Hi, how you doing?
It's really hard to hear the rabbi.
All right, can you hear me? Pamela, you there?
Yes, I can.
Good, how you doing? Thanks so much for coming.
Well, thank you for inviting me, or actually allowing me to invite myself.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's good you enjoy it. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Okay, Lisa, you there? She's there.
What is she doing? It looks like she's some Secret Service office or something.
All right. Lisa's enjoying her coffee.
Yeah.
Hi, Lisa.
Good morning.
All right, then Roxana, how you doing?
Good, Baruch Hashem, good. A little late, but good.
No problem. It's good to have you. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, thank you.
Good. And then, okay, so Hannah, are you there?
Hey!
Oh, you made it. Wow, look at that. Namaste to you. All right, thanks for coming. I saw a message. I didn't get a chance yet to read it, so thank you. That's good. And Sylvia, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Shavua Tov, everyone.
You.
Good to
have you. Thanks for coming.
I'm glad to be here.
Are we getting a tour of the house while we wait?
I guess you did, an impromptu tour.
Thanks for coming. Good to have you. Okay, Arya, you there?
Shavua Tov. I had my mic off. Sorry.
Oh, okay. How you doing?
Shavua Tov.
Good to have you.
How are you doing?
Yeah, thank God. I'm all good. How you doing? How's your week?
We're doing great. Just get ready to get back to work here after class.
Okay, I hope you got some questions after today's lesson.
We can't keep them too long. We're gonna make that money.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure I will, especially if it's about electricity.
we are getting there. Patience.
Oh, Okay.
It'll be a shocker when we get there.
All right.
All right. Bracha, how you doing? Bracha, are you there?
Hi, Shabbat
Hi. Shavua Tov. How you doing?
Good, sorry, I'm driving.
All right, no problem. Stay safe and focus on the road.
Yes.
Thanks so much for coming. Really appreciate it. Okay, Antoinette, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you doing? How's your week been?
It's been challenging, but it's okay. I just,
Are you?
I had those two teeth pulled.
Yeah,
so
no.
it's kind of weird.
Is that why we don't see your smile?
Yeah, but I'm also getting ready to go somewhere with my husband, so I'm trying to do class while I'm getting ready. So, but yeah, I don't have any teeth in the front, so I don't smile much, and if I talk, you can see a big hole there now. So it looks really strange, but that's okay. I didn't think it was worth the $600 they wanted to give me a temporary thing to cover it.
Maybe you'll reconsider another time.
Nah, I'm not worried about it. All right, blessings. I'm grateful to be here today.
Great. Thanks so much for coming. All right, Chrissy, how you doing? Chrissy, you there?
Oh, I'm here. Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, thank God. Good to see you. Thanks so much for coming. How's your week been?
Just really amazed that with doing more and more people to do, and Hashem really showing me stuff that I was like shocked about, why I was acting certain ways and feeling certain ways, and he's just showing me like a lot as I dig deeper. So I don't like some of the stuff he's showing me, but I'm thankful because now I know where it's coming from, and he'll lead me with how to fix it and make things better. And work is going good, a lot of stuff going good there, just with interacting with different people, sharing everything that I'm learning, and just pretty much saying to Hashem, I really need help, and I want to be a better person for me, for the people around me, and for you, Hashem. And that's just something I've been saying every day, and it's really been helping me.
No, I think you're doing a great job. Keep it up. You're really doing well. Good, and thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. Blessings to everyone.
And then Avichai, you there? You're hiding. Avichai.
Maybe he's in that secret location again where you can't show on video.
Hey, how's it going?
Are you still in Area 51?
I will be. I'll be in Area 51 tomorrow.
I knew it.
Get us an alien.
I'm driving back to Area 51 right now.
All right, I get you. That's okay. But thanks for coming.
Can you get us a ship?
All right,
I guess.
I'll get you a fighter jet.
All right, that's great. That's all I want. I can get places really fast, and anyone stops me, I can just shoot it down.
All right, guys. Okay, so if you're ready, let's start. So today's lesson is kind of a little different to how we have been up until now. And we're now going to start digging into the laws themselves. And today's going to be a little bit technical. So if you want, we're going to follow along on the screen under the Michael Jojo profile. You can pin that. And if you want to have it looking big, we're going to go through some of the laws of Shabbos in detail. So I want to start off with the interesting story. It's brought by the Ramchal, which was brought in a midrash. And it's actually an analogy or in a parable. And the story goes as follows. There was once a king who had a huge orchard, and he had a lot of different servants that would tend to his orchard and was worth a lot of money. He used to make a lot of, like a huge amount of income from this orchard. But the problem was that he didn't trust any of his workers. He was scared that some of his workers might steal his apples and run off with it. So he didn't know what to do. He had a giant orchard, but he needed to make sure that it was safe and was secure. So what he did was he looked all around and he couldn't find anyone that was trustworthy. Eventually, he finds a person who's blind, and he asks the blind person, "Can you watch over the orchards?" So he says, "Okay, I'm blind, but if that's what the king wants, I'll do it." No? So the blind man is guard number one. The second person to come is the king orders a man who's crippled and he can't walk. And he says to this guy, this crippled guy, can you please be the guard for me to watch over my orchard? And the crippled guy said, "Well, I mean, can't exactly walk around or anything like that, but if you want me, then I'll take it." Now the king goes away, knowing that the people that he's chosen to select are going to obviously not be able to steal, and they will ward off any unwelcome visitors just by the mere presence of being there. Now the king gets back after a couple of weeks of vacation and gets back, and he finds that his orchard's been cleared out and everything's been stolen. So he summons the two guards, and he says to the guards, he says to them, he calls the blind man, and he says to the blind man, "Did you steal my apples? Were you responsible?" And the blind man says, "Me? What can I do? I mean, I'm blind. How am I meant to even see where the apples are? How am I supposed to be stealing your apples?" And so the king says, "Okay, I hear you. I mean, obviously it couldn't be you." So then he calls in the crippled guy. Says, "You know what happened? You were meant to be in charge. You're a guard. You were there, right? You could see what's happening. Right? Did you steal the apples?" And the crippled guy says, "Me steal the apples? How am I supposed to run away? I can't even move. Am I gonna meant to take all the apples and run off with it? It's impossible. Obviously, it's not me." Now the king sits there, he's perplexed. He's wondering, these are the only two people that were there. They're the only two people that that he trusted. And what in the world's going on? So eventually, he calls them both in together, and he says to them, both of them, "I know it was you who stole the apples." And the blind man and the crippled man, they are in shock. They said, "How did you know?" And eventually, they tell the king their story. So the blind man said to the crippled guy, he says to him, "I can't see. But what I can do is, if you put me on if you come on my shoulders, right, I can walk around, and you being crippled, you can sit on my shoulders, right? You can show me where to go, and together we'll steal together. So my lack of sight, be compensated with your ability to walk, and your inability to walk be compensated with the sight that you have." And together as a team, they managed to rob the orchards, and they worked in collaboration, and they managed to take out everything from the orchards. Now, this is a parable which is brought with regards to how Hashem interacts with us. And it says, after a person after 120, after we die, when we give an accounting of our life to Hashem, so the body, right, is brought before God, so to say, and the body is accused of doing sins. And the body says, "What? I'm just a body, right? I'm crippled. I can't move, right? Without a soul, I'm just a dormant piece of meat. How can you accuse me of doing any sins, right? I'm not able to sin. I'm a dead piece of flesh. It's impossible for me to sin." And God then calls in the soul, and this says to the soul, "You're responsible for causing these sins." And the soul says back to God, "Me? No, I might be able to have vision, might be able to see, but without a body, I'm just a spirit. I have no influence and no ability to touch or feel or do anything. It's only because I had a body." And God says the same analogy. So what you did was you worked as a pair and in unison in order to complete the task, right? And the body combined with the soul, that is how you manage to accomplish the act of doing what it is that you wanted to do, right, in this world, whether it be for good or for bad. Now, the reason I brought the story is because when it comes to Shabbos, we're going to see that the laws of Shabbos, of what you can and can't do, is very, very much dependent on the thought processes which you have. And for one person, something can be 100% allowed. for another person doing the exact same thing can be completely forbidden. And it all depends very much on the intention and what's going on in your mind. And we're going to try and cover some of the laws, right, with relation to Shabbos. Now, I labeled this class, right? It's called the application of the laws, but essentially what it is, it's a structure or framework to try and understand what it is of the laws of Shabbos. And I've often been asked questions. People ask me, can I do X, Y, and Z on Shabbos? And it may be something like, can I drink coffee on Shabbos? Can I have a bath on Shabbos? Can I brush my teeth? And it all boils down to where does it fit into the scheme of things. And this essentially is going to be a scaffolding class to understand some of the terms and the jargon which is used with regards to the laws of Shabbos. And when you know this, so then you can kind of slot it in, and the rest of it will make sense. So this is kind of like laying the groundwork or the foundation to understand some of the concepts with regards to Shabbos. So we'll get started. I'm going to jump straight into it. I call it the framework for the laws of Shabbos. Now, some of the terms which are used are the following. So you find there's something called mazid, which means knowing and intentionally. So a person can do one of the laws which are forbidden on Shabbos, and if he does it b'mazid, right? Mazid is the Hebrew word, and it translates into doing it knowing and intentionally. So as an example, if a person, let's say, you're not allowed to cook on Shabbos, we'll discuss the exact laws, which things you can and can't do. But let's say a person cooks on Shabbos and he knowing and intentionally does so. So that means that he knows that it's forbidden and he has intention to do that action. So that's called mazid, right? That's called knowing, right, and having intention. There's another kind of category which is a level below that in terms of intention, and that's called shogeg, right? And shogeg means by mistake. So that means either that you don't know the action is not allowed, or that you don't know that it's Shabbos. So it could happen, for example, a person could wake up and could think that it's Sunday, and he can do a whole series of actions not knowing that today is Shabbos. And because he doesn't know that the day is Shabbos, so he'll continue going about his day. Let's say he thinks it's Sunday, and all those actions are going to be actions which are b'shogeg. They done by mistake. Now, there's another kind of shogeg, which is not knowing that the action is not allowed. So I just want to forewarn you, there is a concept in halacha which is brought that mutav sheyeh shogegim v'al tiyeh mezidim, which translates, it's in Hebrew, in English it translates, it's better to do something by mistake than to do it on purpose. So by learning these laws, you will have the knowledge of what you can and can't do, but at the same time, you also then be more accountable because you will know what you can and can't do. So the excuse, so to say, of not knowing that something's not allowed, it only applies, if you're ignorant to the law, so then you didn't know that you're doing something that's forbidden. That's called shogeg, and we'll discuss what the punishments are and how that works. And finally, the third category is what's called oines. Oines means by force or against your will. And something which is done on Shabbos, let's say you were forced to do something. Let's say someone held you at gunpoint and told you to violate one of the 39 malachas. We'll discuss what those are, but it was against your will by force. So then that is something which is it's a lower level, and it's not going to be punishable at all. Okay, so we're going to have a look in a second the different categories and how they fit in. Now, in Shabbos, you'll come across there are different punishments which are prescribed for breaking Shabbos. Now, Shabbos is, as we know, is one of the 10 Commandments, right? It's honor the day of Shabbos, right? And remember the day of Shabbos. And anyone who violates Shabbos with witnesses and with a warning, the punishment prescribed in the Torah is death by stoning. So it's liable to a capital punishment. Now, obviously, today we don't follow and we don't have capital punishments. And in order to have capital punishments, there needs to be Sanhedrin Gedolah. There needs to be the great Sanhedrin of 71 members, which sit in the Lishkas Hagazis, which is in the temple, and we don't have that today. it is interesting, it's brought in the law that should we reassemble and gather 71 judges, it could be possible to reinstate capital punishments in Torah law. But I don't think it will happen, but that is the punishment that's prescribed in the Torah. Now, another punishment which is given with regards to breaking Shabbos is what's called kares. Now, kares means to be cut off. And there's three definitions, possibly more, of what a kares is. So one is that there's a severed soul, which means that when a person dies, their soul is cut off. So we learned off that there's a nefesh, a ruach, neshama, and chaya, and yechida going up in ascending order. Now, between that, there's a link which kind of connects those five elements together. Now, one of the definitions of kares is that those links are cut and are severed, and which in essence it means that we cannot function fully because the parts of the soul are disconnected. So it causes a imbalance within us. So that's one understanding of kares. Another understanding of kares is premature death. Right, that's another definition of what kares is. Just to give you an example, the Gemara in Chagiga says that a person who turns 60 years old can make a birthday party. It's one of the few times that the Gemara actually mentions making a birthday party, because making a birthday party is not really mentioned, but it says if you turn 60, you can make a birthday party. Why? Because living past the age of 60 is considered to be at least not a premature death. So a premature death would mean dying before the age of 60. Okay, that's just brought in halacha of one of the definitions of kares. A third definition of what's called kares, and sometimes goes together, called kares and ariri, and that punishment is a person, God forbid, right, loses his children, right, as a result, right, and that's a form of kares. His children pass away. And that means he's cut off from his from those children. Okay, and then we finally, right, we have another punishment or another rectification called the chatas, and the chatas is a sin offering. Right, it's a sacrifice which is brought, and again, this only applies during temple times. We don't have this today, right? So that's something which is no longer, right. That's the law, but it's no longer relevant. Now, all right, the next thing, which jargon and terms which are used, and I'm going to put them all together in a second, is a word called adim. Right? So adim are witnesses. Now, in order for a person who violates Shabbos, right, to be punished, there has to be two kosher witnesses, and that's a whole section in the Talmud of what's considered to be a witness, what is and what isn't. Right? So adim are witnesses, and there has to be witnesses in order for punishment to exist. The second thing which is there is what's called hasra, and hasra means a warning. Now, the person doing the warning has to inform the wrongdoer with the exact transgression that he's doing. He has to say to the person beforehand, are you aware that doing X, Y, and Z is forbidden on Shabbos? And he has to also tell him the punishment. And if you do so, you'll get X and Y and Z punishment. Do you choose to actively participate in this activity knowing that it's wrong in front of these two witnesses? And if he says, yes, I know exactly what I'm doing and I'm fully participating and I'm doing it, that's called hasra. He's been warned. And if you have those two in combination, only then would you get the death penalty. So the Talmud actually says that getting the death penalty is actually quite difficult, because the scenarios that have to be in place in order for that to manifest is actually quite rare. Normally a person will be acting either out of ignorance, or if he is warned, he would probably stop if he knows the consequences. Okay, now when it comes to Shabbos, it's something which is quite important, and the first term over there is malacha. Now, a malacha is one of the 39 tasks which were done in the making of the Mishkan. Now, not everything is forbidden on Shabbos, and not everything is permissible either. There's a very strict set of parameters of what is allowed on Shabbos and what's not. It boils down to not doing those things which were done in the making of the Mishkan, which we're going to be dealing with in the next couple of weeks, the different sections of what those 39 particular tasks are. but only those 39 tasks are what is forbidden on Shabbos. Anything which doesn't fall into one of those 39 categories is not subject to the laws of Shabbos. So it's very focused, and that's what malacha is. Now, malacha in Hebrew would translate as work, but it's not just how we understand it, working, whatever work it is that we do, but work in the context of the laws of Shabbos means one of the 39 malachas. Okay, now a second thing which is there, and that is what's called meleches machsheves, and which is thoughtful work. And we're going to see in a moment that the Rambam brings that any time a person is not able to think of what he's doing, so it's called, for example, misasek. Let's say a person's just haphazardly or walking around and breaking Shabbos without even knowing what it is that he's doing. He's just not even thinking. Or if a person doesn't pay attention, has got no intention, so that's called that's not going to be subject to the punishments of Shabbos. Because in order for something to be considered a work, you need to have that thought and the action. So getting back to that story we said earlier, there needs to be that connection of the body and the mind. If the body is acting in a thoughtless way, and there's no mind involved, so that's going to be something which is not considered to be meleches machsheves. That's not something which is going to be forbidden on Shabbos. It has to be something which is thoughtful. Okay, now another set of laws or terms which are used is the word chayev. Now chayev means that you're obligated in a punishment. Another term which is used is patur avo asur, which means that you're exempt from punishment, but it's forbidden to do so. So certain things you'll find in the law, it says that you are not allowed to do something, or you are allowed to do. If you did something, you'll be patur. So patur means you're exempt. Now that doesn't give you the go-ahead to do it. It just means that if you do it, you're not going to be punished, but it's forbidden to do so. That's just a category which we'll discuss in more detail, just to be aware that such a concept exists. And then you find mutter, which is something which is permitted entirely. If something is mutter, then it's not a problem of breaking Shabbos at all. Now, with that, I want to be able just to jump into some of the principles of the laws which apply, some general rules. There's 7 of them which I want to look at. And we're going to look in more detail as the coming weeks go by, and you can use this as to go over it, because what we're doing today, it's kind of just setting that foundation, but we'll need to come back to this a number of times. So the first principle is what's called davar she'eino miskavin. Now, doing something without intention. So the example which I've given is brought in the Rambam, and that is walking on the grass. Now, on Shabbos, one of the laws, one of the things that you cannot do, one's not allowed to uproot grass. You're not allowed to sever something from its living source. For example, you can't pick a fruit off a tree. Right? That would be forbidden on Shabbos. Now, if a person walks on the grass, his intention isn't to uproot or cut the grass. His intention is merely to walk. Now, by him walking, he may or may not be cutting up or shredding the grass as he walks along. Now, that's called something which may or may not happen. It's called davar she'eino miskavin. If you do not have intention while you're walking across the grass to uproot the grass, so then it's mutter. It's permissible, and you're allowed to walk on grass on Shabbos because your intention is nothing to do with uprooting the grass. Okay, so let's move along. The next thing, which a principle which you'll find is similar to that, and that's something called psik reisha. Now, psik reisha means an inevitable outcome, and the actual literal translation of psik reisha is cutting off animal's head. And the Talmud brings a story or an example and says, may a person cut off the head of a chicken to give it to his child to play with on Shabbos. Now, in the times of the Talmud, right, they didn't have Hasbro toys went around, so they, Fisher Price went around, so they used to play with chicken heads. And so the Gemara asks, can you take a chicken's head, right, and give it to your child to play with on Shabbos? Now the Gemara says, although your intention is to give the head to your child, of the chicken to play with, but it is impossible to sever the head of a chicken without the chicken dying. Now, killing an animal on Shabbos would be forbidden. Now, although your intention is not to kill the animal, that it happens almost as a byproduct, but since that byproduct is inevitable, right? There's no way for you to do what you want to do without breaking one of the laws of Shabbos, so it becomes forbidden. Just even though your intention isn't to break Shabbos, your intention is simply to give a toy to your child, but since the method of what you're doing inevitably breaks Shabbos, so that's called inevitable outcome, and that is forbidden. Okay. Another principle which we're going to look at is something called malacha she'en tzricha lagufa. Now, a malacha which is not needed for the malacha itself. So the example which I've given here is extinguishing a flame to use the oil. Now, there's another example which maybe demonstrates it a little bit clearer, and that is digging a hole where you don't want the hole per se, but you want the sand. Now, on Shabbos, it's forbidden to dig a hole. And the reason why you can't dig a hole on Shabbos in the ground is because that's the first step of planting. Right? The first step of planting is to dig a hole in the ground to make a furrow. And in that furrow, you put a seed. Right? That's the planting. And so one of the first steps of the planting process is making a hole in the ground. Now, so making a hole in the ground over here is a forbidden action. Now, you have no intention of where you want you don't have no desire for a hole per se. You simply want that sand. Now, over here, your intention is not to, again, is focused on the sand, similar to psik resha, but over here, your intention is focused on the action of making a hole. So you are involved in the malacha, but that malacha which you're doing is not intended for that purpose. So you have no desire for doing that malacha, and that's going to be forbidden as well. Okay, so don't get worried, guys. If some of these terms are new and confusing, just keep them in mind, and we will come back to them. I want you just to know at this stage, just to be aware and familiar with these terms, because I will be referring to them, just so you know that they exist. Okay, the next principle which applies in Shabbos is something called shnayim she'asu, when two people did the malacha. Now, if the example which I've given is if two people held a pen and wrote. Now, you're not allowed to write on Shabbos, and the minimum amount of writing is writing 2 letters. Now, normally writing can be done by a single individual, right? You pick up a pen and you'll be able to write. Now, if 2 people held the pen together, that's called shnayim she'asu, 2 people that have done that malacha. And if it's not necessary, so then you are not going to have violated Shabbos, and the law is it's patur avo asur, which is a term which we used before. It means that you exempt. There's no punishment, but it's forbidden to do so. Now, the reason why I say that is when it comes to, for example, different medical situations or different emergencies or different situations where it may become a requirement to break Shabbos, if you know the foundation rules of what is and isn't allowed and how it's categorized, you would understand that under certain circumstances, you can lessen or change the state of the action based on how it's performed. So shtayim she'asu, if you have 2 people doing a malacha and the malacha doesn't require 2 people, so then it will change its status and it will drop it down from a daraisa, a Torah prohibition, down to a rabbinic prohibition, and it can then be patur. An example is if let's say 2 people are required to do that particular malacha. So, for example, if you've got a heavy plank of wood and you're carrying it. Now, carrying on Shabbos is one of the 39 malachas. It's forbidden to do. Now, if you were to carry a plank of wood with 2 people, now although 2 people are performing this action, but each one of you is needed. So there, the law of shtayim she'asu, 2 people that did it, would not apply, and both of you would be liable. So shtayim she'asu, this law only applies in a case where it's not needed, where 2 people are not required to perform that task. Okay. The next principle which we're going to look at is what's called makalkel, and makalkel is a destructive action. And the example which I gave is ripping up good clothes. So on Shabbos, since we said that in order to violate Shabbos, you have to have a thoughtful action, has to be a constructive action. Anything which a person does which is destructive in nature. So, for example, let's say you're angry, you start throwing plates, against the wall, and you're smashing stuff up, or you tear clothes. Anything which is destructive in nature, that is considered makalkel, and you are not liable on Shabbos, right? It's not considered to have been breaking Shabbos if it's done in a destructive manner, right? So it's going to be a very, we'll see as we learn the laws, and as we come with the real life examples, we're going to see that these laws are all working in the background, and that's why we're going to have to come again and again over these main principles to make sense of it. Now, the last one over here is what's called psikresha deloi nichale. Psikresha, similar to cutting off the chicken's head, over here is deloi nichale, which means that it's an unpleasant or it's an inevitable but negative outcome. And one of the examples is brushing your hair, which causes baldness. Now, obviously, a person wouldn't want to lose their hair. Now, when you brush your hair, if you're using let's say a brush which is, or a comb which is going to pull out your hair for certain, so then it's going to have an outcome which is inevitable. So though your intention is not to pull out your hair, your intention is to brush your hair, but since the outcome is inevitable, so to fall in the category of being a psikresha, that which is inevitable. Now, in this case, it makes it slightly different, and that is deloi nichale, which is actually Aramaic, which translates into it's not pleasant for you. Now, sometimes the consequence, your inevitable outcome, is something which you don't want to happen. It's something which is negative. And according to most opinions, if it's deloi nichale, if it's something which is not pleasant for you, so then although a regular psikresha is forbidden, but a psikresha which is not one undesirable psikresha, that is allowed. Okay, so that takes us kind of to the end of that what you call it, right, of those principles. And I just want to go over a couple of examples which we'll get to see that in just in terms of the punishment and how it works. So if you look at the book on page 75, so over here the punishment is as follows. So if a person breaks Shabbos without any witnesses, so the punishment is kares, which means he does it with intention. He knows what he's doing and he breaks Shabbos willingly, but there's no witnesses, so then the punishment will be kares. If he does it with intention, so that would be b'mezid in Hebrew, and there are witnesses, so that will be the highest category of, and the punishment will be skila. And if a person does something b'shoigeg, then by mistake, you don't get any, right? You bring a sin offering, you bring a korban chatas. Now, in terms of the laws, so we're going to look in the next couple of weeks at the 39 malachas, and we're going to see, I'm going to bring some examples of the cases of the, so the first order is broken down into 4 different orders, the 39 malachas. They're not broken down into equal segments. For example, the first section has 11, right, and it goes down, there's different orders. We'll discuss what those orders are. And they all got to do with the construction of the Mishkan. And if a person break Shabbos by violating any one of those 39 principles or any of their derivatives, so then we have to look at the action in a specific context. So we will come back to these laws, and I'm going to refer to the concepts just for ease of reference. I might say that something is forbidden because it's a psikresha, which means because it's an inevitable outcome. Or I might say that something is potter. When I say that, I mean that it's forbidden to do so, but there's no punishment. Or for example, I might say this is a case of shtayim she'asu, that this is allowed on Shabbos because it's a case of 2 people doing it. So these principles, I think, are very important to set the framework of what is and isn't allowed on Shabbos. If we work within this framework, then we can start slotting in all the different 39 malachas to understand the application of how these laws apply. And so today is kind of just more of a structural lesson more than any juicy bits, more of a technical lesson in a way. But with this basis, I think it's going to make it a lot easier, to understand some of the complexities. Because I found that keeping Shabbos, especially if you don't have it in a structure and you don't have the principles, well set, so then it becomes confusing why in some events it will be forbidden, in other cases it will be allowed. So it's all based on these principles. We'll get to see them working in action, as we go through it. So if you guys have any questions, you can unmute yourself. I'm happy to take any questions if you got. You guys can hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I don't have a question, but it's a very hard topic, especially, sometimes it seems, even for me, that I've been, for many, many years, some of the laws are a little bit difficult these days, but, I always said, well, we're trying to do it better every time.
Right.
But
So the truth is, I found is that the more you learn, it's kind of counterintuitive, but the more you learn, the easier it becomes. When you haven't learned, so you're very unsure of what you can and can't do. But once you know the laws and the principles and the mechanics, you know with absolute certainty with what you can and can't do. So that's something which is important. That to get very clear on the principles and the laws, and then you'll find that burden of uncertainty will go away. And very often the things which you think you can't do, it's just a matter of changing it. I'll give you a story which we'll get to when it comes to making tea on Shabbos. So there's a law called the Kli Shlishi. We'll get there when it comes to cooking on Shabbos. Where the law is that if you want to make tea on Shabbos, you can't use the first vessel. You have to pour it from one vessel into another. It has to be 3 different vessels to cool the water down sufficiently enough to make tea. So there's a story, I think it was with Rabbi Lashiv, who's a very big rabbi in Israel, very big pasek, and his wife spilt water on him, and he started screaming. He said, I'm burning, I'm burning. And she says to him, you can't get burnt. This is a 3rd vessel, which means so we'll see that there's a way in a mechanic to do things. So very often the things that you want to do can be done on Shabbos. It's just a matter of knowing how. And then once you know how to do it, it actually becomes a lot easier. So that's why it's important to learn the laws.
It is. But yeah, and I was just reading a little bit, and I like the way that you explained them there in the book. It's easy to understand.
Yeah, so the truth is that in the book, it's actually harder, I had to leave out a lot of stuff to make it more simple, and it's actually harder to leave things out than to include things. So I tried to simplify it as much as possible to make it as simplistic, as can be, to so that the person that's coming into it and experiencing it, doesn't get overwhelmed, because there's literally thousands and thousands of books on the laws of Shabbos. So, but we'll get to understand it. Good. Any other questions?
Please.
Yes. Okay, so take Hannah, then we'll come to you next.
Okay, thank you. It's just 2 questions. The one is, if you could please just go over that point again where 2 people are doing something, like holding a pen together, it doesn't make it. That's the one. But the other thing is, I'm away from home at the moment, and where I am, there are lots of mosquitoes, and it's really, I mean, when you are sort of endangered by pests like that, and I'm calling them pests, in a way they are, am I not allowed to deliberately spray and deliberately, if they land on my skin, I know what they're going to leave? Can I not
Yeah.
kill them?
So we will get there, but in short, just for now, so you'll know what to do for Shabbos. You may, and we'll discuss it in more detail. So mosquitoes, especially in South Africa, carry malaria. You definitely can. So that's the law which you can go by. In terms of your first question, with the law it's a principle called shtayim she'asu. If two people do an action which is only required by one, it lessens the degree of how that work is performed. Because in order to violate Shabbos, you need to do kind of a superior action. Now, in order to have what's called meleches machsheves, in order to have that superior action, it needs to be thoughtful and constructive. Now, when two people carry out a task which could be carried out by one, so we see one of those people as being useless, which kind of diminishes the work which is being done. And when it's diminished, the actual malacha, it drops down from a daraisa level, from a Torah level, down to a rabbinic level. Right? And essentially what's going on is you degrading or devaluing the work which is being done. And it's important again to know these things just because they arise in different situations. And as I said to Roxana, sometimes knowing how to do something is actually very important. Especially if an emergency comes up or something out of the ordinary comes up, you can know that the way to minimize or lessen certain things, right, is to drop it down. It's actually interesting. You reminded me of a story. The Chazan Ish. I think it was the Chazan Ish. He was known to be very particular with in all his rulings. He was very strict in all his rulings. He was very stringent in all his halachic rulings. And it turned out that one time he needed an operation on Shabbos, and his son went with him to the operating theater and started telling the surgeon, no, if we do it like this, and if we hold the scalpel like this and like that, we don't have to break Shabbos, and if we don't turn on this and we don't do that. And the Chazan Ish was very particular and very stringent, and I said, ignore my son, it's a case of life-threatening situation, do it exactly as you would during the week. So it's sometimes, again, the more you know, that's what the commentaries say. There's a concept in the Talmud which says which translates into the ability to permit something is actually preferable, which means you need more knowledge to allow something than to forbid something. Anyone can make something forbidden. You can just be always err on the side of caution and say, no, you can't do it, it's forbidden, it's forbidden. But if you know the laws well enough to know when and how it's forbidden, so you will be much clearer and you'll be able to say, no, this is actually allowed. So again, that's kind of the perspective where I'm coming from. Good. Who was next? Question?
Me?
You have one from REA in the group that has a hand raised on internet, and whoever that was.
Okay. So Arya, do you want to go for it?
Okay, my phone wasn't cooperating with me. I was trying to get the mic back on.
Okay.
Yes. So, just a quick question. You mentioned that your person is not allowed to write more than 2 letters on Shabbat, and
Right.
I was just curious though because I thought any type of writing utensil would be muktzah on Shabbat. So how would one even write 2 letters if you don't touch the writing utensil?
Right. So the laws of books are actually rabbinical. We're going to come and deal with them separately. But you'll be right. One of the reasons that muktzah exists is to prevent someone as like a safety net to avoid getting to that stage where you may violate a malacha. So it's kind of like a precaution. So if we don't touch things which will inevitably lead to doing a malacha, then we one step removed. But let's say a person violated the laws of muktzah, he ignored them or didn't know that they existed and picked up a pen. So he hasn't broken the Torah law until he's written 2 letters.
I see. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Right. And again, we will break it down into its components to see what's rabbinical and how the different kind of compartments fit together. To see what's the Torah law, what's rabbinical, and what's added and how kind of it meshes together. So it will start making more sense when you start putting the various pieces of the puzzle together.
Okay, that actually kind of answers another question I've had for a long time. Well, I mean, it's not so much of a question, but yeah, it's kind of an interesting aspect that I kind of wondered about, because in the Ethiopian tradition, traditionally, they prior to coming to Israel, it was the practice to carry money to the synagogue and place it on the steps as a tzedakah on Shabbat. And when they came to Israel and they were practicing that, everybody freaked out. Money is muktzeh, how can you do such a thing? So that actually kind of makes sense now that how that would apply.
Yeah, so we'll learn about that in detail. We'll actually discuss how the evolution of muktzah, how it actually started, when it began, and how it was added into the laws of Shabbos.
Okay, sounds good.
Good, excellent. All right, who was next?
Me, I guess.
Antoinette. Yes, Antoinette, how you doing? Yeah.
Okay. So on Shabbat, if you obey the law and you know the rule, but you have no heart and desire to follow it, and you do it anyway, is that how? I mean, they say, well, obey the law and you'll learn to love the law, so to speak. So is that true, or should there be an intention there when you're doing it, other than just, okay, I'll do it because you said I should, but I don't agree with it and I don't understand it and I'm not sure how to comprehend it. And I think that I think that you explaining a little bit more details, like you were just talking about the writing thing, it's very, sometimes you hear it as just don't do any of this at all. And then, wait a minute, there's more details. So maybe it's in the details that you become more, you begin to understand more, and it makes a difference. So my question actually is, so what if you do the mitzvah without any intention in your heart?
Well, so you're asking a great question. I think it applies not just to Shabbos, but to all of the Torah. And that is, sometimes there's kind of an emotional disconnect between what we're supposed to do and what's expected of us, and what could be written in the law books and what we feel like doing. And what I found is that one should always look for understanding, for something to make sense to you. And usually, they say a good question is better than a good answer. So if something feels that it doesn't make sense to you, I always advise to explore, find the reasons, understand it better, to the point when you actually understand why it's forbidden and why, until that point where it makes sense for you. And that's something which I think we can do, to uncover and to reconnect that emotional, call it cognitive dissonance between what we feel like doing and what we kind of supposed to do. To act like a zombie and do things, it's not sustainable. You may be able to keep it for one Shabbat, but in the long run, you're gonna get very frustrated and resentful, perhaps, towards Shabbos. So it's always important, I think, to learn the laws and to try and make sense of it, and to ask as many questions along the way, until it does actually make sense. A lot of it will make sense when you've understood it, on a deeper level. And sometimes you'll find that what you've been told or recommended is only one opinion, and there are other opinions, which will have reasons and thoughts similar to how you've been thinking.
It seems like, I've because of living out like I did for so long, and I didn't have any way to be warm in the winter without starting a fire, or I wasn't able to eat, you don't want to eat freezing cold food when it's freezing cold and you have no way to warm it. So I had to learn, creative ways of making things for myself, but, to work at least functionally on Shabbat, so that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, so like I said in the beginning, I think it was to Roxana, that a lot of the things which we think are forbidden are actually permitted, provided that they're done in the correct way. So
good. I'm interested in learning these things. Thank you.
Yeah. Good.
So we have another question from Sylvia. And that question was, how does music come into play in this? No pun intended. So for Shabbat.
Okay, I don't know. The question: how does music
come into play during Shabbat?
Yeah.
I like the pun.
Okay. All right. So, are you allowed to play music on Shabbos? So it's a rabbinical decree not to. I've seen it with the source of it. The origin is the Talmud in Tractate Bates. I think it's 23. I have to check it up again. Which says that a person can't play a musical instrument because he may come to fix things, make repairs on Shabbos. But again, a lot of the things which were forbidden for us. So in the temple times, all these malachos which were forbidden for us, in the temple itself it was allowed. And during the days of the temple, so on Shabbos would actually go up, if you were taking part of a service in the temple, you would hear the Leviim that will be singing with with all their musical instruments. So in a way, it's not just the things which are forbidden for us. Some of these things are permitted in the temple service. So we don't today play musical instruments in Shabbos, and the origin is rabbinical in nature. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Okay. Yep. So then D also has a question as well. Go ahead, D.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. This was a really great class. One of my questions is, as a non-Jew, like I haven't converted yet. I don't really plan on converting at this moment. But I have a question about observing Shabbat as a non-Jew. So I've heard it said that definitely a non-Jew should not observe Shabbat as a Jew. So I'm wondering, are there laws for non-Jews in observance alongside of a Jew that observes? Like, are there specific laws for non-Jews?
Right. So in short, the answer is a non-Jewish person is not commanded to keep Shabbos. So you have no obligation to keep Shabbos. If you do want to, it's completely voluntary. This to be something that you're doing, as a volunteer, so to say. And it's quite easy. What's recommended is that if a person wants to keep Shabbos and they're not Jewish, is that they would break or violate one of the laws of Shabbos so that they don't completely keep Shabbos. It should be deliberate. That's normally what's done. So in your there isn't a set of laws for Shabbos for non-Jews per se. It's just they're not obligated. So just like, for example, only let's say a priest in the temple is obligated, to bring a sacrifice, and not a Levite. So non-Jew is not obligated to. It's not part of their requirements. So you'll find there's different sections of the Torah which are requirements for different sections, for different demographics within the population.
I guess thank you. One of my biggest questions is there anything that I should not do? Like, is there anything that as a non-Jew I should not do? I should not observe, or you're just saying like blanketly, just don't do one thing or don't do another thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So there's nothing in particular which you it's up to you. You can use your discretion entirely. There's no obligation. So as I said, it's a voluntary act. So whatever you feel that you feel connection with, and you're connecting with Hashem by doing these things, so that's your own prerogative and your own choice. Which one of the 39 laws you choose to violate, that's completely up to you. There is no obligation. Right? So it's completely
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, so RA had one more question.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So the question came up about music, and again, he was brought up another question that I've had from years past now, when we first started to become more observant again. and wanted to be Shomer Shabbat. I have 6 kids, so I didn't want to rush everything on them all at once, and we wanted to go step by step, and and wanted them to enjoy it. So one of the things that we started to do early on, as we became Shomer Shabbat, is that we had a playlist of Shabbat songs, and then we would turn that playlist on before Shabbat, and then allow it to play throughout the evening of Shabbat, and then it would turn off by itself when the playlist ended sometime in the night, and it made it enjoyable for the kids, because after it was in the other room, and then after we would do prayers and everything, we would go into that room and they would all dance, and it was big fun family thing. So my question is that something that's actually a violation of Shabbat, or would that be permitted, since we actually haven't turned it on or off on Shabbat?
Right. So from the way you described it, sounds that it's permitted. So you set it up beforehand. Now, I'll tell you what I'm saying, but a lot of people may disagree with it. But my own personal view is that, like learning anything new, sometimes we have to make mistakes and do it wrong initially in order to get it right for the long term. It's all about getting it right in the long term. So very often we need to start off in a way that suits us, and in a way that's appropriate. We might not be keeping Shabbos, 80, maybe it's 70 or 80%. But if our goal is to get to 100%, and that's what we are aiming for, so that's really, we have to take the stepping stones sometimes. So in your case, even if it was a violation of Shabbos, the end goal, in your situation is to get to a place where you're going to keep it. So, many people disagree, but I personally believe that the net result, is that you'll be better off in the long run. So it's better to do it willingly. Maybe it's not 100% correct, but so long as you're going to get to the right place in the end, that could be more valuable than to force it, to try and do it 100%, and then after a few weeks, you might quit Shabbos altogether. So one has to always weigh up, is it the benefits, versus the pros and cons of each situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, Brooke said.
Okay. I think that's it.
All right, guys. If there's no other questions, by the way, if anyone wants the PowerPoint presentation, I'll share it on the group with you. If it's something you want. Okay, I'll put it on the group. And other than that,
Thank you,
right,
Rabbi.
guys, thanks so much for coming.
I gotta go to work now, guys. I'm gonna say Shabbat Tov to everyone.
Good.
Yeah, go make me some money.
Bye. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
guys. Thank you
Shabbat
so
Tov,
much.
guys. Be well. Thank you, Rabbi. Yoshikoach for your
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
All right.